The Answered Prayer Lecture by Neville Goddard, 1951. Before we commence, let me pose a question. Have you ever encountered an answered prayer? How frequently have you prayed and received responses? What wouldn't people give just to be certain that their prayers lead to definite outcomes? For this reason, I would like to dedicate some time to explore why some prayers are answered while others seem to fall on unresponsive ground. When you pray, believe that you will receive, and you shall receive. Believing that you receive is the condition imposed on humanity. Unless we hold the belief that we have received, our prayers will remain unanswered. An answered prayer implies that something has been accomplished as a consequence of the prayer, something that would not have happened otherwise. Thus, the one who prays becomes the source of action, the mind guiding the one who grants the prayer, a responsibility that many are reluctant to assume, as responsibility appears to be an unseen nightmare for humanity. Everyone operates under the law, yet between prayer and its answer, such a connection isn't always apparent. There's a prevalent notion that God may choose to respond or ignore our prayers, that our prayers might hit or miss the target. The mind still hesitates to acknowledge that God subjects himself to his own laws. How many individuals genuinely believe in a cause and effect relationship between prayer and its answer? Let's delve into the means employed to heal the 10 lepers, as recounted in chapter 17 of the Gospel of St. Luke. What captivates our attention in this narrative is the method employed to elevate their faith to the requisite intensity. We are informed that the 10 lepers implored Jesus for mercy, that is, for healing. Jesus instructed them to go and present themselves to the priests, and as they obeyed, they were cleansed. According to Mosaic law, when a leper recovered, he sought a priest's certification for restored health. Jesus introduced a test for the leper's faith and provided a means to amplify their faith to its maximum potential. If the lepers resisted going, it signified a lack of faith, and healing would be unattainable. However, if they complied, a profound understanding of the implications of their journey would dawn on them as they walked. This dynamic thought would bring about their healing. As we read, as they went, they were cleansed. You have undoubtedly heard the words of that age-old inspirational hymn, "What peace we often forfeit, what needless pain we bear, all because we do not carry everything to God in prayer." I, too, arrived at this conviction through personal experience, prompted to contemplate the essence of prayer. I believe in the practice and philosophy of what humans call prayer, but not everything bearing that name truly embodies prayer. Prayer involves elevating the mind to what is sought. The initial corrective term is always lift, always elevate the mind to what is sought. This is easily accomplished by assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled. How would you feel if your prayer were answered? Well, assume that feeling until you undergo in imagination what you would experience in reality if your prayer were answered. Prayer denotes engaging in mental action. It signifies maintaining focus on the idea of the wish fulfilled until it dominates the mind, displacing all other thoughts from consciousness. Stating that prayer involves mental action and sustained focus on the idea of the wish fulfilled, eliminating all other thoughts from consciousness, does not imply that prayer is a mental exertion or an act of will. On the contrary, prayer should be distinguished from an act of will. Prayer is a surrender, signifying the abandonment of oneself to the feeling of the wish fulfilled. If prayer fails to evoke a response, there is something amiss with the prayer, and the failure typically stems from excessive effort. A significant confusion arises when individuals equate the state of prayer with an act of will, rather than establishing a sovereign rule over an act of will, the supreme rule being to make no effort. If observed, you will naturally adopt the correct attitude. Creativity is not an act of will but a profound receptivity, a heightened susceptibility to embracing the end, the acceptance of the answered prayer. Seek the means for its realization. Immerse yourself in the state of the answered prayer until that state entirely displaces all other states from your consciousness. What we should focus on is not the development of will but the education of the imagination and the equilibrium of tension. Prayer succeeds by avoiding conflict. Above all, prayer is effortless, its greatest adversary is effort. The mighty surrender completely only to what is gentle. The wealth of heaven cannot be seized by a strong will but freely surrenders as a gift to God. Spiritual and physical forces travel along the lines of least resistance. We must act on the assumption that we already possess what we desire, as everything we wish for is already present within us, waiting to be claimed. The act of claiming is a necessary condition for realizing our desires. Our prayers are answered if we assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption. One of the most delightful examples of an answered prayer that I witnessed in my own living room involved a charming lady from out of town who came to me about prayer. Since she had no one to leave her 8-year-old son with, she brought him along. During our conversation, he seemed engrossed in playing with a toy truck. At the end of the interview with his mother, he said, "Mr. Neville, I know how to pray now. I know what I want. A spotted puppy, and I can imagine I'm hugging it every night in my bed." His mother explained to him the impossibilities of his prayer, the cost of the puppy, their confined living space, and even her inability to properly care for a dog. The boy looked into his mother's eyes and simply said, "But Mom, now I know how to pray." 2 months later, during Animal Kindness Week in their city, all school children were required to write an essay on how they would love and care for a pet. You guessed it, his essay out of 5,000 entries won the prize. The prize, presented by the mayor to the boy, was a spotted puppy. The boy truly assumed the feeling of his wish fulfilled, embracing and loving his little dog every night. Prayer is an imaginative act of love, which will be the subject of my message next Sunday morning at 10:30. My wish for next Sunday is that I may explain to you how, like the boy, you can surrender to the lovely images of your desires and persist in your prayer, even if you, like a boy, hear that your desires are impossible. The need for persistence in prayer is shown to us in the Bible. Which of you shall have a friend and go to him at midnight and say to him, "Friend, lend me 3 loaves, for a friend of mine has come to me on his journey, and I have nothing to set before him?" And he from within will answer and say, "Do not trouble me, the door is already closed, and my children are with me in bed. I cannot rise and give to you." I tell you, though he will not rise and give to him because he is his friend, yet because of his persistence, he will rise and give him as many as he needs. The translated word persistence literally means shameless impudence. We must persist until we can imagine ourselves in the situation of the answered prayer. The secret of success lies in the word perseverance. The soul, imagining itself in the act, assumes the results of the act. Not imagining itself in the act is always free from the result. Experience in imagination what you would experience in reality if you were already what you want to be, and you will assume the result of that act. Do not experience in imagination what you want to experience in reality, and you will always be free from the result. When you pray, believe that you receive, and you will receive. One must persist until reaching a higher level of consciousness. One must persist until their feelings of the wish fulfilled have all the sensory vividness of reality. Prayer is a waking dream under control. If we want to pray successfully, we must fix our attention to observe the world as it would be seen by us if our prayer were answered. Constant attention requires no special faculty but demands control of the imagination. We must enlarge our senses, observe our changed relationship with our world, and trust in that observation. The new world exists not to be seized but to be felt, to be touched. The best way to observe is to be intensely aware of it, listening as if we heard and looking as if we truly saw. Hearing voices and seeing scenes within ourselves that would otherwise be inaudible or invisible. With our attention focused on the desired state, the external world collapses, and the world, like music, rearranges its scenery, transforming all its discords into harmonies. Life is not a struggle but a surrender. Our prayers are answered by the powers we invoke, not by those we exercise. While the eyes perceive, the soul is blind, for the world that moves us is the one we imagine, not the world around us. We must surrender our entire being to the feeling of being the noble one we wish to be. If anything is retained, the prayer is in vain. Often, our lofty goal is denied by our effort to possess it. We are told to act on the assumption that we already are the man we would be if we did so effortlessly. By experiencing in imagination what we would experience in the flesh if we had realized our goal, we will discover that we indeed possess it. The healing touch is in our attitude. We need to change nothing but our attitude toward it. Assume a virtue if you have none. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. More things are accomplished by prayer than this world dreams of. Now, let us enter into silence.